Juggernaut fans, we're back. Matt Wiedemer, Beat Personal Training, www.beatpersonaltraining.com. We're here with Mike Israetel, nutrition guru, and he will be speaking at the Juggernaut seminar on May 24th in Cincinnati, Ohio, here at the Beat Personal Training facility. Mike, thanks for coming aboard. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. I'm doing very well.
Great. Mike, are you training for anything now?
Yeah, I'm training for a bodybuilding show in Kansas City. I think it's on June 7th or 8th. I always get the date mixed up. I'll show up on one of those dates, and hopefully there'll be a show that day.
Yeah, great.
But, yeah, so that's what 6 and a...
If there's a show
That's right. That's right. Oh, I should be lean by then. So it's 6.5 weeks out, which means I'm pretty miserable. But cool stuff's happening to the physique, so that's all part of the plan.
Mike, what got you started? So, were you an athlete in high school, or how'd you get going in bodybuilding?
Yeah, I was a crappy wrestler in high school, and during wrestling, I think I didn't really eat enough, and the training, there was no periodization involved back then. There was no deloading, there was no fatigue management, so I'd essentially get sort of overreached every wrestling season. I'd end up quitting probably, I think, 3 out of the 4 years I wrestled. I quit halfway through, and what I did was I just started training with weights every time I quit, and I loved training with weights. I really looked forward to it, and at first I started training with weights to get better at wrestling. Then eventually I just was training with weights. By the end of high school, that's all I did. By college, I was doing a whole lot of bench pressing, and I realized that I could break some federation records. I broke some federation records. That was pretty cool. Back in the day, I lifted raw during the height of double and triple ply gear popularity, so I was a little bit of an odd duck. And then I kept powerlifting, picked up some bodybuilding magazines right around 2004, 2005, really started to get to like to build muscle and to lose fat. And then I actually got around, I just kept getting bigger and stronger because I knew that really was the basis of bodybuilding was size. Never want to be one of these guys who steps on stage at 150 pounds. There's nothing wrong with that. That just wasn't for me. So my first show I actually did a year ago, and I stepped on stage at a really crappy conditioning, but at 5'6", I was on stage at 233 pounds.
Jeez.
So that was my first show, and I showed up big. So this show will be my second show, probably going to be on stage more like 225, but significantly leaner, and my plan is to just simply get leaner every single show, and of course I'll be adding some muscle as well until my goal is just freaky conditioning. I wanna show up looking like a freak. If I can do that, I will have accomplished a lot of what I want out of the sport.
Very cool. What were your powerlifting records? What was your best bench press for the guys at
home?
Oh
man, it's so funny because I've been training for hypertrophy now for a while, and I can now do for reps what my personal records were to meet. My best meet squat, I think, was just over 500 pounds at 220. My best bench was at 385, and my best deadlift was 567, I think, at 220 or 242 or something like that. And that was a very long time ago. I've recently done, I've squatted 500 high bar for 10. That's on video. I've benched 365 for 8. And I've deadlifted a lot. So I don't know. It's kind of when people ask me about my competition PRs, it's always like, ugh, that's a real long time ago. So yeah, it's cool now. I've been getting bigger and stronger for a really long time, and that's really working out well.
That's great. I think that's cool you said that because so many people have the misconception that bodybuilders are not strong, and that's not always the case. It's not very often not the case.
Yeah, it depends on compared to who. If you compare bodybuilders to elite powerlifters, yeah, they're not as strong. If you compare them to really jacked people that lift weights, they're very strong. Right. It also depends on how you approach bodybuilding training. I think the most effective way to put on muscle is to use heavy weight for moderate to high repetitions. Sets of 8 to 10 in the compound heavy basics, squats, deadlifts, bench presses, pull-ups, bent over row, shoulder presses. That's what makes jacked people. Nobody ever got jacked doing leg extensions or leg curls or any of that crap. You can do that stuff later at the end of your workout, but the basics have to be built. Muscle size is built with heavy, deep squats, bench presses, bent rows, all that kind of good stuff. And if you want to get bigger, the surest way is to get stronger for reps. How do you get a bigger back? I just recently bent rowed 350 pounds for 8 reps, strict with no movement whatsoever in the upper body. It's on YouTube. I don't know how to get a bigger back other than bent rolling 365 for 8 in a couple of months. That's the only That's the only way I know how to get bigger. I don't know, quality contractions or any of that crap. Maybe if I'm a pro bodybuilder, that stuff will start to work. For now, just getting bigger involves getting stronger on the compound movements for reps, plain and simple.
That's great. And then now you said you're 6.5 weeks out. Are you still lifting heavy this close to a competition?
Well, you lift as heavy as you can.
Okay.
Essentially, you want to make sure your training volumes are high to conserve the most muscle mass. So you don't want to lift heavy in sets of 3, show off, but not accumulate enough training volume to keep your muscle, because essentially the biggest contributor to muscle size is how high your training volume is, or how close it is to the most that you can recover from. Right. And probably the most efficient way to get to high volumes is between sets of 8 to 12 reps. Any more reps and you're not training heavy enough to keep most of your muscle size, any fewer reps and you're going to get too beat up by the time you reach the volumes you want. So let's say you want to get really high volumes, you're like, okay, I'm going to do sets of 3 to get to super high volumes. But how many sets of 3 are you going to have to do in order to get the same equivalent as 5 sets of 10? Holy crap, your knees and elbows will be blown out by the time you get there. Right. So sets of 8 to 12 are pretty much the meat and potatoes all the way through the final weeks as well. I think people get hurt lifting super heavy. I think some supplements are involved in that. To be a little bit politically incorrect, people take all kinds of really crazy steroids for peaking and bodybuilding, which is totally fine if that's your thing. But the problem is a lot of those supplements make you very strong as far as the muscle, but they don't make the connective tissue strong nearly as fast as when you're depleted, dehydrated, you got those crazy drugs in your body, you go, I feel like God, I'm going to go for a bench 1RM, and you get it halfway up, and then your pec pops off the bone. Right. So I think the deal with training heavy up to a show is you can train moderately heavy, absolutely for high volumes, still use the basic hardcore movements, just don't do anything really stupid like trying to max out 2 weeks before a show. And the crazy thing is, I'm not just, it's not just like, oh, of course everyone knows that. A bunch of pro bodybuilder training videos, you'll see guys go up to like a 3RM on an incline press or a squat, and this is 3 weeks out of a show. It just baffles me every time. And then they get hurt and they're like, oh, I don't know what happened. Really? Really? You don't know what happened? That's my rant. Sorry.
No worries. So now most of the guys coming to this seminar are going to be probably more, I'd say, power sport athletes. You got CrossFitters, you got powerlifters. I know one Olympic weightlifter's coming. So how do you work with a number of clients in that arena? What would you say to the strength athlete for performance? What do you usually recommend for those guys?
As far as training or diet or periodization or
I would say for nutrition, how do you get those guys so they can keep their strength levels up without looking like a slob, essentially?
Sure. A lot of that involves some really long-term goal setting and working slowly. One thing that Nick Shaw, he's the owner of Renaissance Periodization, which is the company I consult for. One thing Nick and I really sort of take to heart is the idea of a true weight class athlete. So a true 220 in a powerlifting organization, which weighs in 24 hours before the event, actually walks around at about 240 pounds. Right. And a true 220 probably has, from the perspective of what's best, as low of a body fat that is sustainable. So, in reality, when you got guys competing at 220 and they want to get better at 220, the real question you have to ask is, do you have 10% body fat and do you walk around weighing 240? And a lot of guys are like, that's a really jacked dude. Well, that's Jay Nara, Dan Green, all the top guys at 220. That's exactly what they look like. Right. So a big goal for powerlifters from the purpose of nutrition is to slowly, at the right times, mostly in the off season, not in the month leading up to the competition, to build fat. Good God. To build muscle, to stabilize that new body weight, then to cut fat slowly but surely, and do that in repeat cycles, which take months and years to build the muscle necessary to really fill out your weight class. I think people have a bit of a misunderstanding and say, oh, I'm going to compete as a 275 pounder. Do you know how jacked a true 275 is? I mean, that's unbelievably enormous.
Yeah.
One of our clients, Justin Grolfs, I don't know if you've ever seen any pictures of him.
Yeah.
His back takes up like 5 bathroom mirrors all at once. It makes no sense. That's what a true 270, he has to actually drop water to get to 275, and he's probably about 10% body fat. So with a lot of powerlifters that approach us for nutrition guidance, we really kind of, we got a lot of guys approach us weighing about 190, and they're like, well, I think I want to compete in 198. And we tell them, listen, let's get you to 181. You're a true 181 right now. And we can even build 10 pounds of muscle over the course of 6 months or so, and you'll still make 181. You'll just be leaner.
Right.
A 198 is really far away from walking around at 15% body fat at 190. I mean, a true 198 is a 220 with abs.
Yeah.
And then you get them to 215 somehow, and then the rest is water. So our goal for our guys is a lot of body composition work, because in the end, muscle lift weights, plain and simple. If it didn't, we wouldn't have a need for weight classes.